I'm DvT. I'm a psychologist and a drama therapist.
Okay, so we're going to be, this afternoon, we're going to be working on the Miss Ken드라 program and the DvT short form. One of the things that researchers have discovered is that stress, particularly what's called toxic stress, meaning high levels of stress, interferes with students' ability to learn. A little bit of stress is good because it motivates you to work. But if you've been under a great deal of stress constantly, especially day after day after day, from hunger, poverty, humiliation, abuse, trauma, any number of things, your ability to concentrate, to use your brain, is very much injured. In the United States and in other countries, quite a few students beginning in elementary school are having more and more difficulty. They've been given medications, but they don't work. They've been given study aids and teachers and mentors, and that doesn't help, because the problem is coming from the situation in their home environment and neighborhood environment where they're under tremendous stress. In my home, my father was a doctor, a medical doctor, and when he got drunk and hit my brother or yelled at us and said really bad things, we knew not to tell anybody because my father was a doctor. So one of the reasons that there's more reported abuse in families of poverty is that in families that are wealthy, everyone knows not to speak. What happens is that there's stress in the home, it creates stress in the child holds on and doesn't speak about it, and the child still goes to school and behaves, but inside he's having trouble. And then usually in about 4th grade or 5th grade, they can't handle it anymore, and it starts to kind of leak out. And either they go one of two ways in the United States. Either they show signs of anxiety and depression, and they get sent to the counselor, they go to the doctor, and they start to become sick. And then they become, as a teenager, they have an eating disorder, they start to cut their body, they act out, they start to use drugs, and things go down. Or they get more aggressive, they get angry, they start fighting, they yell at the teacher, and then they go down where they're punished. They're not given medications, they're punished. They start stealing money from and the credit card from their parents. They run into problems with the police, and in some cases they may be, becoming more criminal. So the idea is that once they've started to go downhill, it's too late. We want to intervene up here before the 5th grade, even kindergarten. It is impossible to tell, just looking at a child, whether or not they are under a great deal of stress. So you get these kindergartners and 1st graders, and they all seem to be fine. But some of them may be under a lot of stress. But our policy, and I'm sure the policy in Korea, is we do not ask. We do not ask, we wait. We wait until things start to fall apart. But by the time that the problems break out, it's too late. So we cannot wait. And that means we have to ask early on. How does all of this impact on their ability to learn? It impacts what we call the executive functions of the brain. These are managed in the frontal lobe, in the front of the brain. These are management of your thinking. First is attention and concentration. How long can you attend and concentrate on a topic? Now, if I started talking continuously, about what I'm saying, how long can you listen to me before other thoughts come into your mind? Has anyone been thinking about something else while I've been talking right here? Or are you all completely attending to me? Some students can hide it, and the people who cannot hide it begin to show it. But you never know how many people are not listening to you until you give them the test. And then you give them the test and you realize that they were not listening. Another executive functioning is called cognitive inhibition, which means when you're listening to the teacher and another thought comes into your mind, you're able to suppress it. That function in the brain is impaired under trauma or toxic stress. So imagine having some of these thoughts come into your mind. It's one thing if something like, I wonder what I'm going to have for lunch comes into your mind. That's easy to suppress. But I'm stupid, I'm alone, I don't know where my father is living. These thoughts are very hard to suppress. So the Miss Kendra program is designed to help this situation. And it's something that we developed in the United States for the United States. And if you were going to do it here in Korea, you would change the language and change everything you needed to do to fit your situation in your community. And usually that meant renaming Miss Kendra, if you have to come up with a new name. The purpose of the Miss Kendra program is to be able to find a way to ask students if anything is going on with them in school without disturbing the learning and the teaching. We want the students to feel that if there's something going on at home, that they have easy way to communicate that in school to somebody who's going to help them without having to call the police, but rather just basically get some support. And what we want to do is there's a kind of a threshold here of in other words, there's a certain amount of stress that you can handle. And then if it's too much beyond that, then you run into trouble. And what we want to do is to drop that level just below the level of the thing. We're not trying to eliminate the stress. We just have to lower it below the threshold of tolerance. Have you ever had a big argument with your wife or your husband and you're really upset, but you go to work and within about a half hour you're able to forget about it and work, and then you remember it at the end of the day as you're driving home? So that would be here. That means like you're very stressed, but you're able to work. Have you ever gone to work after a very big argument, very disturbing, and you can't push it down? It disturbs you the whole day at work, and you go to the bathroom and you spend extra time in the bathroom just sort of like worrying about it, or you just find a way to kind of pretend to be working, or you put your head down at your desk, or you close your door and don't do something. That is when the stress is above the line. So the Miss Kendra program has involved several things. The first is the legend of Miss Kendra. We wrote a story about a pretend figure named Miss Kendra. And in the story, Miss Kendra is a single mother who has a 10-year-old child whom she loves more than anything else in the world, who sadly at the age of 10 dies. And she's very, very upset, and she grieves, and she's told by the doctors that she cannot have another child. And so she doesn't know what to do, and she's very, very sad. After a while, she's walking to work, and she passes a school next to her, and she sees the children coming off of the buses, and she says, I wonder if they are safe. And so she says, I'm going to volunteer in the school to help out. And so they allow her to do that, and they put her at the front door of the school, and every morning she greets all of the students when they come in the morning with a smile, sometimes with cookies, and always with some questions. And she's loved by all the students because she's there to greet them, And she asked them questions. In the beginning, they're simple questions like, how are you doing? Is everything okay? Are you worried about anything? And then over time, she asks deeper and deeper questions, such as, is anyone hurting you at home? Is anyone sick or ill at home? Do you have enough food? And these questions got deeper and deeper. The children loved these questions, and most of them said, no, I'm fine, everything is fine. But occasionally a student would sit there and look sad and go, yeah, you know, my dad was yelling at my mom. We didn't have enough food. I was all alone. And whenever that happened, she would lean over and she would take the child's hand and she pulled out a little string with a red wooden bead on it. And soon some of the children were wearing the red wooden beads like with a bracelet around at school, and people would say, oh, where did you get your red bead? Is that a Miss Kendra bead? And they would say, why did you get yours? And the person would say, it's because my dad was yelling at my mom, or I didn't have anything to eat. And then the years went by, and years later, a bunch of the students became teachers. And they got together one day and they said, hey, do you remember all those questions that Miss Kendra used to ask us? And so they did, and they brought all these questions together and they created what's called Miss Kendra's List. And so this is Miss Kendra's List, and this is a big poster that is put up in every classroom. And this is put up even in kindergarten. And then we explain to them, it's basically trauma theory, what the effect is. And so these are the effects of these bad things. So we began this program, and we had our staff tell the story to kindergartners, third graders, fifth graders, everybody. And every class reacted the same way. Oh my God, that's terrible what happened to Miss Kendra. Where does she live, and can she come and visit us? So we tried first to keep the myth. You know, we wanted to keep the myth, so we said, well, we're not sure where she lives. And the kids said, well, how do we reach her? And one of our staff said, well, I guess you could write a letter. And so that worked really well. And so what we did is that we asked the students, when they have a classroom activity, do they write letters to Miss Kendra? We got mailboxes, and here are some of the letters. Mommy and Daddy and TT saved me when somebody broke in. Dear Miss Kendra, my family is always fighting. It scares me. Sometimes I feel sad about it. I wish it would stop. Could you help me? Dear Miss Kendra, my grandma died and I am sad. She got shot. We then have people read their letters out loud in the classroom. We have our counselor, and every child gets a letter back from Miss Kendra responding to their letter. We decided that we would let the sixth graders know what we were doing by saying to them, listen, we're doing this program called Miss Kendra with your younger brother and sister, and we've made up the story about Miss Kendra, and the kids are writing to Miss Kendra, they're going to come home and think she's real. Would you not blow it? Don't blow it, okay? And they said, no problem. All right. Then the counselor said, but we want you to know the story. So I'm going to tell you the story now. And the counselor told them the story, just like we told the younger ones. And there was a silence in the room afterwards. And in the back of the room, one 12-year-old kid raised her hand and said, Miss Kendra is real. And all the kids in the room went, yeah, meaning she knew that Miss Kendra was made up, but she meant that Miss Kendra, the character, referred to real things that are going on in the world. And they all wrote to Miss Kendra. And a week later, they all got a letter back from Miss Kendra that they knew the counselor was writing, and they held on to these letters. So what is going on here? We call this an imaginal social buffer. A social buffer is when you are in stress, you have somebody who's there with you to care for you and to soften the stress. A nurturing parent figure who is imaginal. And we realized immediately that this had an effect on the children's nervous system. And it turns out there's neuropsychological research that shows this exactly, that all a child needs is one trusted adult to be able to speak to about their stress, and that can lower the stress hormones in the brain. And the main effect of the Miss Kendra program is to create a feeling in the children that somebody who cares for them is available to listen to them about what they're worried about. And we saw dramatic drops in acting out behavior and other symptoms in children as the program was instituted. Okay, you are a 4th grade class. This is your teacher. We are the drama therapist. And we'll go through and read the list. Blah, 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 blah. And then we're going to say, today we're going to be talking about the last item on the list, which is no child should have to see other people hurt each other. Should things like that happen?
No!
Do things like that happen?
Yes!
And if they happen to you, what should you do? Should you tell an adult that you trust?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, now watch. I've asked your teacher to pretend to be your mom. And your dad is about to come home from work.
또 늦었어? 몇 시야?
뭔 상관이야.
술 마셨어?
말하기 싫어.
그럼 집에 왜 와? 와봤자 맨날 늦게 오고 말 안 하고 그럴 거 집에 왜 오냐고.
Time out. So, class, what's happening? What are they fighting about? Great. What is about to happen?
아빠가 엄마를 때릴 것만 같아요. 물건이 깨질 것 같아요. 큰 소리 나고 각자 방으로 들어갈 것 같아요.
All the children get very excited about this, and I'm asking what's going to happen in the scene, but they're telling me what they're from their experience. So they're not saying this happened to them, but that's what's on their mind. So if this was your mom and your dad, and you were home, what would you do? What should a child do when mom and dad are in a fight like this?
Police.
Call the police.
Call the police. These scenes are very effective because they involve the teacher. The students get a chance to speak up, and it brings back any thoughts that they have about themselves. And so the next statement that you make is, so, has anything like this happened to you? So the Miss Kendra program is working with the classroom and doing some drama therapy in the classroom. So when we began to work in the schools, and we had drama therapists, we said it was great. We can take children out of the classroom for a short time and play with them, and that will help them with their stress. And the teacher said, great. And we were used to doing regular DvT for an hour. And we knew we couldn't take the kids out for an hour, so we said, you know, we'd like to take them out maybe for 45 minutes. Is that okay? And the teacher said, no. And we said, oh, okay, all right. How about a half an hour? And they said, no. 15? Okay. So the short form was created by the teachers who forced us to do it short. This is not therapy. So even though and those of you who were for the trauma-centered DvT, it's the good news, it's very much like that. It's almost the same as trauma-centered DvT, the desensitization part, which can be done in 15 minutes, but it's also different. It's different because it's not therapy. So number one, you don't know much about the child's background. Number two, you're not going to be seeing the child the whole year, every week, the whole year. You may only see them a couple of times. You're going to be basically trying to reduce, you're going to be helping them express their energy and their emotion and get it out. It's like a massage. So it's the idea is that we're going to be working on trying to reduce the stress in the moment, and it will have a little bit of an effect for a while. What we're trying to do, the goal, is to help the child vent their emotion and become aware of what they're really bothered by. So all we need to do in the short form is name and remind them that what they're upset about isn't on the surface, it's one of these deeper problems. So all we need to do is name it. You have time when you take the child out of the class and you walk down to the playroom to ask them, what is worrying you now? And just like trauma-centered DvT, you place a demand or a challenge on them. But it's more playful. It can be tag.
술래잡기 같은 그런 형식도 할 수 있고요.
It can be hide and seek. Where is Johnny? Where are you? But you can do anything. But the idea is you're coming for them. You need to always respect the defense, the protective shield. So in trauma-centered DvT, you're going to push through more and then lose. In short form, you just kind of bump into it. Once you understand the shield, once it's established, and the child is reacting in a consistent way to whatever you're doing. Just like trauma-centered DvT, you then come at it at different ways, come in different ways. And you can change role, and you can transform, and you can try different ways, just play with it differently to allow the theme to kind of emerge. And as you're doing that, and you're trying all these different things, you're watching the client very carefully, just like DvT, for something in their nonverbal behavior that refers to the deeper issue. That means what you want to do is make a lot of different attempts and suggestions to see what's going to activate them. So with one child, 8 years old, I came in, he ran over there, I bumped into something here, he said, you can't come in. I tried breaking it, I tried climbing, and he wasn't that interested. I knocked, I said, would you like a drink of juice? And immediately he perked up. And then I said, right away, I didn't wait, right away I said, ooh, I have a big sandwich. And he immediately leaps up, he comes like this and says, he reaches up and grabs the sandwich. Can you guess what his real issue is in life? He's hungry, so I'm trying to check it out. And I said, oh, you're hungry. And he immediately went into the release. He just slumped over. The wall disappeared. And this is what we call the moment where I paused and I looked at him and I said, do you have enough food at home? And he looked up at me as sad as he could be, and he just sort of nodded. And I said, I'm so sorry. Not having food at home is really hard. And he just looked up at me. End of the session. All we need to do is to name the real problem. I reached out my hand, he took my hand, and out the door we went. And for the rest of the week, he was as calm as could be. Whenever he saw me, he knew that I knew, and that I cared, and that I noticed, and I asked. That's it, okay?